About 20 years ago, on a beautiful sunny day in April, my toddler son wandered into the background. He wandered into the backyard. And moments later, I experienced every parent's nightmare. I saw him floating, face up, in our swimming pool. His beautiful, sweet face, his matted curls suspended, still. No child is that still in a swimming pool. In what truly felt like my life flashing before my eyes, I was suddenly in the water, administering CPR, calling his name, and somehow he came back. We often find ourselves in places we never wanted to be. Not always that dramatic or cinematic, but terrifying and uncertain all the same. We don't feel brave or holy or prepared. We feel unsteady, unholy, desperate. In the days that followed, our family clung to one another. We said Hagomel, the blessing for surviving a life-threatening situation. We tried to move forward with strength and gratitude. But I couldn't shake the feeling that in that moment, something incredibly holy had happened to us. I felt the presence of the ineffable, the protection, the love. I felt held, watched over, surrounded. I felt that this trauma, and it was traumatic, had opened my senses to something beyond the grid of the everyday, to what is genuinely miraculous. We often say, if I could just see a miracle, then I would believe. But I wondered, does that mean we have to walk away from a car wreck, from an ICU, from a burning bush? No, thank you. I can live without that kind of proof. And yet all these years later, with a perfectly perfect 21-year-old, I remain convinced of this, that we have become inured to the sacred. We've trained ourselves not to notice the extraordinary that surrounds us all the time. I'm often asked, especially by kids, Cantor, do you believe in God? And I always want to change the question. Not do I believe, but how is my relationship with God? Not do I believe, but do I notice? At this point in our Torah reading, at the beginning of the book of Exodus, Parshat Shemot, we've descended into Egypt as a reunited, if not entirely functional family. Turn the page, several generations later, we find ourselves vastly increased in numbers, but now powerless and enslaved by Pharaoh. Moses rises in the palace. He grows a conscience, and then he leaves, exchanging the security of royalty for the uncertainty of the wilderness. And from that moment on, the Israelites will spend generations trying to understand their relationship to a God they cannot see and cannot understand, shedding the habits of slavery long after they have physically left Egypt, because it takes something remarkable to break a habit. And sometimes that remarkable thing is an encounter with the divine. And very often, we find God not in comfort, but in unusual, uncomfortable, and even frightening places. I had that experience in a swimming pool. Where have you had yours? Where are the places that we avoid looking? Which moments do we rush past? Which conversations do we postpone? Which truths feel too tender to touch? Sometimes the very places that frighten us are the places where God is waiting. So what happens to Moses after he leaves Pharaoh's palace? He flees to the mountains of Midian. He joins a foreign clan. He marries. He has children. He becomes a shepherd, as far from the royal life as one can imagine. And then one day, while tending his flock on Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, totally should have been a hint, he encounters one of the most cinematic moments in the Torah. A messenger of Adonai appeared to him in a blazing fire out of a bush. He gazed, and there was a bush all aflame, yet the bush was not consumed. Vayera malach Adonai elav, belabat esh mitoch hasneh, vayar, vehine hasneh, boer ba'esh, v'hasneh enenu ukal. Moses noticed. He is fascinated, terrified, interested. And that noticing is itself a miracle. He doesn't rush past. He doesn't explain it away. He doesn't say, not today. He turns. I must turn aside to look at this marvelous sight. Why doesn't the bush burn up, he says. Vayomer Moshe, asura na ve'er'eh, et hamar'eh, hagadol hazeh, madua lo yiv'ar hasneh. And only when he turns, only when he slows down, only when he pays attention, does God call out, Moses, Moses. And Moses answers, here I am. It's not in the text, but I imagine that Moses feels both fascination and fear. And that's important because fear does not cancel holiness. Sometimes it reveals it. Vayomer al tikrav halom, shal ne'alecha me'al raglecha, ki hamakom asher ata omed elav admat kodesh hu. God says, do not come closer. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you stand is holy ground. The Hebrew word for shoe, na'al, comes from the same root as the word to lock. And that's the same word that we use in the final moments of Yom Kippur, the service called ne'ilah. The word for foot, regel, comes from the same root as the word for habit, hergel. So God may be saying more than take off your shoes. God may be saying, unlock your habits. Before Moses can free others, he has to loosen what binds him. Before he can change the world, he must allow himself to see differently, opening his eyes to the presence of divinity and sacredness and wonder. It has always been with him, and he just didn't realize it. The opposite of habit is presence. The opposite of numbness is wonder. And the opposite of fear may not be courage. Maybe it's attention. God doesn't appear to Moses in a palace or a sanctuary. He appears in a patch of wilderness, in something ordinary, something burning. Because sometimes we are burning, and yet we are not consumed. The burning bush can be grief. It can be illness, doubt. It can be a transition we didn't choose. It can be a truth we've avoided. And the miracle is not that these things disappear. The miracle is that they can become places of an encounter. So I wonder, where in your life might God be waiting? Not after the fear, but inside it. What habits need unlocking? What sandals need removing? What would happen if instead of turning away, you turned toward the fire? Sometimes the holiest ground can be the place where we are most afraid to stand. Shabbat Shalom.